This is the Unshadowed Thought Podcast with James Hall. This podcast is dedicated to Michelle Goyevich, Ed White, Caitlin Treacle, and I Chan, and also all the others that have lost their life as a direct result of psychiatric harms.
Okay, welcome back to the cast. Thanks for listening. For those of you that keep listening, I think it's really rad. And I hope you found a cool little unoccupied space of the metaverse or the net or whatever you want to call it, however it exists. But I'm glad you're here. So I decided to do a check-in today on my post. I mean, I'm gonna call it 2 months. I don't been keeping track of time, but I know I'm close to 2 months or maybe over 2 months since I did my prolonged water fast. And so as a check-in, here's where we're at. I just wanted to be honest. People have asked me different questions and I give some generalized answers. I think I covered it on the last podcast. Unless you ask a specific question, it's hard to answer, specifically what people are looking for. Although I try my best because so many things change after a prolonged water fast. Just like some people that have profound changes or profound happenings in their life, right? It's hard to, you could talk for days and people write books about the stuff, right? And some people write multiple books about the stuff. It's hard to be specific with kind of general questions. But I decided it was time to give a check-in and just be honest about what's going on, what's good and what's not, that kind of thing. So before I talked about the things that didn't change. Like my cognition has not improved yet, but lots of other things, my metabolism, digestion, energy, emotions have all improved. My akathisia has been gone. That's huge. That's just massive for anyone that's dealing with akathisia. This is inner akathisia now, not external or both. It was just inner. It was really severe. It was happening multiple times a week, and it was absolutely punishing in ways that can't describe, blah, blah, blah. Everyone that knows about akathisia or has experienced it and kind of knows that. So those were kind of the major overlooks. So today I'm not going to dive into the major things that changed because I think I covered that pretty well previously. And I haven't had a lot of changes to that. Like my hair has grown back fuller and thicker. This was one cool thing that happened. And I continued to feel more balanced since the fast. Right after the fast, I would feel really elated. And then, I would have some moments of panic, and then I'd feel really good for a while and then have these little events. So it's been more balanced since then. It's continued to even out, which is, I would consider it a good thing. If I was a little scared after my fast because I felt so good. There was some moments where I felt so good, like all day, that I actually got scared. And I was like, I don't know if I want this, which I think I talked about a little bit, but just the erratic nature of how I felt after the fast freaked me out a couple times. And I think people like to feel balanced and controlled. Well, generally, right? I mean, I certainly do. I'm kind of a control freak in some ways. And that's certainly one, like what I experience in my body, I like to understand and feel balanced in. So for me, things have been more balanced, which has been better. And so let's talk about exactly, like, we're checking in. This is what's happened. So I haven't had those high moments of elation much anymore. Those have kind of tapered off, but I haven't had as much of the panic that I was having after, or the stress about, feeling so different. It's been more of an even keel now that I've gone forward and some time has passed, which has been great. But I have had, let's see. So my digestion's still good. My metabolism is still good. I don't know if I feel as energetic as I did coming straight off the fast. Sometimes I just had a tremendous amount of energy and it felt super solid. Now it's more even. So I certainly have plenty of energy. It's not as if I still feel like I have way more energy than I did pre-fast. I've like, when I need energy, it's there. I'll wake up, sometimes I'll be really energetic. Other times I wake up and, I just get going fine and it seems more normal, right? I've been told, and I'll circle back to this in a little bit, but I've been told that, you have to eat really, really well if you want to keep the gains from your fast. And whatever you were dealing with, it hasn't gone away. It's just in remission, right? So you have to keep up with things, which makes perfect sense, right? But for me, I was somehow hoping that like the stuff would just beat, my body's healed, and I can just eat whatever I want and do whatever I want, and I'll be totally fine, which I think that's turning out to be false, which I'll go into in a minute. But I think I'm kind of happy with myself for going on a limb and trying it and testing it, right? You want to know whether you're really healed or you're just in remission, whether stuff can come back or whether it's just gone away entirely, which maybe that's a little bit ambitious, but I think I would have tested those waters at some point anyways. Maybe I'm glad that I did it earlier rather than later, but certainly, it's when I'm finding out, I'm listening to other people, listening to other podcasts, watching other interviews, and people continually say, which I knew ahead of time, right, that whatever you were dealing with, it's just in remission. It just doesn't go away or disappear. You're still susceptible to the same issues you had in the past. And I'm finding out that's true. And, that stuff's cropping up when like I'm indulging a couple things. So let me take a step back. I'm already going two different ways at the same time. So everything generally, I'm keeping my gains, as long as I'm doing well, right? And keep staying happy and healthy, right? Keeping myself positive thinking, eating well. I'm keeping my gains. They're not as extreme, right? I just feel good and even during the day, which is just millions of miles better than how I was doing, right? And then, so here's the kicker, is that when I'm not doing well, so when I'm indulging my negative thinking, when I'm overworking myself or I'm eating really badly, like I go backwards from where I'm at, from feeling good and kind of even, like I'm going backwards. And I have done that for a couple days in a row. And when I do, I feel pretty bad. Like I get scared that I feel so bad, right? I'm more anxious and I kind of get this generalized anxiety, which is something I had before my TMS injury, right? Like I'm just kind of anxious all the time, right? It's no good. No one wants to be there. And I was susceptible to some panic, or negative thoughts, like depression, all that stuff. So it kind of starts creeping in. And I noticed it's coming on at specific times. If I'm overeating, it seems like my nervous system is under just a big tax, right? And I'm gradually, after I overeat, then, and this is usually in successive meals, I'll eat a lot for breakfast, I'll eat a lot for lunch. And then by the time I've eaten a lot for dinner, like it's just way too much food for me. And I went a little bit into this in previous casts, I think maybe on the last one, is that I'm just too much intake. Like, and maybe I'm just eating the same as everybody else, right? But for my body, for my unique persons, like it's just too much. And it's just starting getting anxious. And maybe it's a psychological thing. Maybe I'm thinking I've eaten too much, but even when I try to relax, like I just can't. Like it really feels physiological. That's what I'm experiencing. So if I'm eating too much, if I'm indulging negative thinking, like it's a slippery slope. And I start to go backwards. But if I'm eating really well, it's easier to avoid those negative thinking patterns because I just feel better, right? Like, and everything's going. I feel like I'm doing well. I have the right behaviors, or like I'm kind of living out. I'm physically manifesting like my positive thoughts. Keeps the positive thoughts going. But if I'm doing either one of those well, and I do too much activity, I'm finding my brain gets overwhelmed and then I crash, right? I'll start getting real fuzzy in my head. And then if I just keep going, keep doing stuff, then I crash out and I start to have some panic and stress and stuff. And then I'll feel tired and I'll even feel exhausted after one of those things, right? Like the more I eat, the tireder I feel, right? Which we're supposed to be the opposite, right? You should eat well, or we're kind of taught if we eat a lot and eat appropriately, like we'll have a bunch of energy, right? Like I'm getting the opposite thing. So that tells me that wisdom is not appropriate for all age levels, right? When you're a kid, you eat a lot, you're growing, you're doing a lot of things developmentally, your nervous system needs a lot of energy. That's right. As you get older, right, your functions are different, your body's different. It doesn't make sense that we would have to eat the same amount as when we were a kid, or that we should, or at the same intervals. I think intermittent fasting is doing well for a lot of people. I'm intermittent fasting right now, loosely, because I'm finding that I don't need to eat that much in a day. I'm closing myself down to an eating window, and I'm doing way, way, way better than that, better with that. And it's going back to, I'm going back to getting my fasting gains, as I feel those really solid. But when I don't do that and I just eat all day and I eat whatever I want, and I say that loosely, again, I've said this before, but when I say I eat whatever I want, it's 80% healthy, organic, like good stuff. But still, like, I'll have, like a piece of pizza or something that's available around me. I'll have a little bit, and that stuff tends to, just slow down your digestion, bog everything up, and just stack on top of everything you've ever had. I never really, which I want to try this, is just eat something I'm not supposed to eat, but eat a little bit of it, like inside my fasting window, and see if I still react poorly to it. Right. Because right now, I tend to indulge when I've already eaten a lot. So I kind of have to sort those out and see what's real and what's not. There's a really big question around, is eating poorly or eating things that aren't as nutritious or not organic, not fruits and vegetables, not holistic, is that really the culprit behind this stuff? Or really is it our thinking and just our body and the different factors around it, psychological, physical, like, are we overworking ourselves in a different way and just then responding badly to food when it's not actually the food that's causing the issue? So I'd like to try to get to the bottom of that. Yeah. And then also when I do too much, I crash out. So what is this all telling me, right? This is all telling me that while I'm doing much better, it's, when you're not doing well, it's really hard for you to remember how well you were doing. Like, so one day if I start kind of messing up and feeling badly, I feel like I haven't made any progress. Like, I'm going backwards, and that's it. It just ruined all my progress for my fast. And that I've just slipped back into where I was, right? All I have to do is feel anxious to feel that way, right? They may not be true in any sense, except for that I'm just thinking negatively and I feel anxious, right? But when you're existing in that space, that's your reality, and that's how you feel. And then when I kind of work my way out of it, I'm like, wow, my gains are still there. It only took me 24 or 36 hours. Now I feel so much better. I feel solid, relaxed, really enjoying the things going on around me. And I'm fine, I'm in good shape. I'm in better shape than I ever thought I'd be after an injury like I sustained, right? So I'm dealing with those two kind of paradigms of thinking that I'm experiencing regularly right now. But in the past, it was a lot more on the better side, but I was maintaining a lot better. But now that I'm learning this, I'm kind of going through a little learning process right now with it and feeling things out. But as I learn, I'm taking the punishment of learning, having the negative effects, but they're massive learning experiences. I'm learning my boundaries. I'm learning the truth behind what's going on, what I can do and what I can't do. And while those may be very punishing, the wisdom I gain from that is tremendous. And that's tremendous benefit that's just going to carry me a really, really long ways, right? And it's going to enhance my healing, right? If I know my boundaries, then, I'm going to be in really, really good shape. So that's how I look at it. But for my check-in, right, for the purpose of the check-in, I'm really, yesterday I was really wrapping my mind around the fact that I'm just in remission and I'm not, free, covered and healed like I was. Can't rewind the clock like 30 years and be a kid again and just have a fresh slate. It's just not, it's not reality. And that's hard to digest. Actually, that's manifested a lot of negative thinking for myself as well. And that tells me I haven't accepted my situation. There was a time when I did, and I think I felt a lot better about that. But as I go forward, you work yourself out of this and think that somehow you can be free of all of your being, like, your mental and physical being. And it's just not grounded, and it's not appropriate when I think about it. I don't want to be free from my choices. I don't want to be free from what I have to endure in this life. that's what's meant for me, and I'm glad to do that. But it doesn't change, my psychology of trying to somehow believe that I can work my way out and be totally free and never have to live with all the choices that I made in the past, regardless of how, my progress or whatever. So that's what I'm dealing with. And part of me thinks that, you can accomplish anything, you can do anything, you can achieve any results. If you want to be healed, you can be healed. And even as I say that, I know that's possible on some level, whether it's a spiritual level, it's a spiritual goal that you can attain, or physical or whatever. There's a way to be completely healed. I'm sure of it. Right. But we are here where we're at right now, and that's a good thing. So right now, what I'm facing is that, I'm in remission. So I have to act accordingly, or I don't have to act accordingly. I can act however I want, but reality is reality, and there's something for me to learn from it, and there's something that I can benefit from it. So am I doing that? Am I focusing on that? Am I focusing on the positive and or the neutral, coming back to a neutral state where I can just experience life for what it is? Or am I trying to, ruminate on the negative? Am I trying to put myself in a spot, toxic positivity? Am I trying to put myself in a spot that I'm not? No, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be there. So for people that are considering a prolonged water fast, take these things into consideration. Think about them if you want, but this is the reality. And I wish I read about before I did the fast, and now I'm hearing about and reconfirming after the fast. As good as you treat yourself is really the results you're going to have. So set yourself up with a good plan to treat yourself well after the prolonged water fast, if that's what you're interested in, or whatever other thing you try to do, and look to take care of yourself ongoing, as you should anyways. And, you'll hold on to your gains, you'll continue to heal, and test your boundaries by all means, if that's what you want to do. But if you start to go backwards in whatever way, it might be wise to be open to the fact that, as if you're going to experience negativity as you go forward as well. Nothing's perfect. I mean, if anyone's promising you something perfect and some complete healing, whether that's in the medical paradigm or the holistic paradigm or the do-it-yourself healing paradigm, it's not real. Like, I've never seen a single person that's just been like, boom, I'm done, everything's great. Like, it's just not the way it is. I keep looking for that, I keep expecting it, I keep seeking it for myself, but I keep coming back to this realism that I should be working on accepting and being grateful and joyful for what I do have, rather than what I want to have and what I think I deserve at times, and being selfish. So that's where I'm at. So I got some fantastic gains. I'm still holding on to those. Again, they're more even. Like, I haven't for a little while had those really erratic, joyful moments, but I feel like they're still there. They still come up. It's just a little bit more even, a little bit. Again, I'm feeling more like I was, earlier on before my injury. I look at pictures of myself and I was like, man, I was enjoying my life. I was doing fun stuff, but I wasn't having this screaming excitement that I did when I was a kid all the time. Kind of more back to that. Like, it's what I make it. If I go out and have really good times and have good fun, I will get incredibly happy. But if I'm just hanging out, being healthy, exercising when I can, and enjoying my relationships, doing small fun stuff, then I experience small fun times, right? Which is wonderful. It's entirely, it fills you with contentment, and it's great, so enjoying that for what it is great. And that's where I'm at now, but that's what you'll get, right? And that's what I expect, and that's where I'm at. So I see the balance as a really good thing and an appropriate thing, which after going through a severe injury, you really just want appropriate, right? You want some balance, and that's where I'm at anyways. So, and then with the negative, if I overdo it, if I do things I know I'm not supposed to do, or I just feel really bad, I can find out a reason why that is, and I can work on it. But I'm not liberated from feeling badly or having downturns. I haven't had any akathisia. I've had some panic and anxiety that's creeped up, and it's been really unpleasant. And I thought to myself, if you keep doing this or keep exposing yourself to this, if you keep doing too much in the day and eating too much and then just ignoring your thoughts, letting the negative stuff creep in or the stressful stuff creep in, you're going to end up back there, or it's entirely possible. So be aware and be respectful and mindful of it and go forward. So I don't want anyone thinking that if you had resolution or you resolved your akathisia from fasting, like you just don't have to worry about it and it would never come back. I think it's something you need to be mindful of, anyone that's experienced it. We don't want to live in fear of it, because even just thinking about it and living in the fear of it seems to kind of bring it back to life. And those are some of the thoughts that I've had, and I don't want that. I get scared of just thinking about it. That's how vicious it is. That's how insidious it is. It's just so wild. It's so wild. But when you're doing well, those thoughts, they don't have the life that they did, and it doesn't feel like that. But when you're not doing well and you start thinking negatively and you get anxious and you start thinking about akathisia, it starts to feel like it's coming back to life. And so it's important that we give it its respect and its place, and we're mindful of it going forward. And we do the best that we can, and we're wise about what we do and what we're looking at. So I have to agree, it's in remission, and things are as good as I make them and as diligent as I try and as respectful as I am to myself and my circumstance. That's where I'm at right now. So I think that goes for my check-in. Again, I don't have a list of specific questions here to answer, but nothing, that's the truth. That's the true story behind what's going on. So I wanted to share that to give people realistic expectations. As time goes on, things are shifting a little bit, as they will with anything. Nothing stays the same forever. So that's where I'm at for my check-in. Okay, so with that being said, I want to move on to some of the thoughts I've been having lately. And I've been listening to chronic fatigue syndrome stories, recovery stories, and information, descriptions, all kinds of stuff. Now, I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome by my doctor because of some of the things I had going on. And I thought, when I thought about chronic fatigue, when I read about it generally and not in too much depth, I just saw it as this inability to have any energy, and like just you have this drained feeling state on you, like 24/7 virtually, and that's how I saw it. I didn't really look into it any deeper. And so I was waking up exhausted, and I was pretty much exhausted all the time when I was talking to my doctor when he gave me that diagnosis. But I didn't look at it any deeper at the time. It fit the description. It was helpful. For medical purposes, it fit, but I was always like, I don't know if I'm having this experience to the depth that everyone else is. I have these other, severe symptoms, and I realized like they were pain, brain fog, then I have nervous system issues like twitches and different things, tinnitus. Some of those fit, some of them don't. But as I'm looking at chronic fatigue syndrome more, I think my doctor actually saw deeper into and knew a lot more about CFS than I did. And the physiological kind of explanation for CFS is inflammation of the brain and spinal cord. And, generally in the body, coming from like, it's basically central nervous system agitation, like to an extreme sense that just kind of self-perpetuates it. Now, if it perpetuates itself. Now, if you talk to people that are dealing with psychiatric injury, it's almost an identical overlay, meaning the reasons for why we're experiencing this and then what we're experiencing. There's these different pain syndromes that manifest in different ways. There's this intense brain fog, this exhaustion, feeling wound up and exhausted at the same time. And I think people mistake that for bipolar. But when we think about bipolar, one, I hate mental health diagnostics is just completely ridiculous. They're helpful, certainly, to describe what we're feeling and dealing with. But as far as the DSM and psychiatry and stuff, obviously, I think nothing of that. And trying to use subjective measures to make objective medical decisions and to put people on dangerous drugs is just an absolutely horrible idea. It will never be a good idea. So yeah, there's that. But when we're looking at chronic fatigue syndrome, the overlay is almost exact with what we're seeing in psychiatric injury, and whether that's electrical, medical, or based on some other device, it'll always be an indefinitely growing category. But there's a severe agitation to the nervous system. And so with that, I'm looking at how are people saying they're recovering from chronic fatigue syndrome? What are the overlaps in terms of what are people experiencing and how they're dealing with it? Like, is there something that can be taken away that's helpful from chronic fatigue that the psychiatric injury community could use, or learn from? And something that was really interesting that I found is that people in the chronic fatigue area are talking about pacing and overexerting yourself. The one thing I realized is that when I did activity kind of that was on par with what I was doing before I was injured, I was okay. But as soon as I tried to push the bounds and exercise more than I had in the past, I would get this post-exertional malaise. So being tired after a workout is one thing, and that's what I was used to. But when I tried to push my bounds on working out after my injury, my brain would be I would sit there and stare at the wall and be like, what's going on? Where am I? What's my name? Like, I would be so utterly mentally exhausted and be in such a cognitive fog, or have such severe cognitive impairment that I could literally do virtually nothing except for the most mundane things. And I felt horrible because I felt so tired. I felt like I got hit in the face with a tennis racket or something, it's almost impossible to describe exactly unless you experience it. Just utterly exhausted. Okay, I have a good description. Just thought of it. I have experienced heat exhaustion before. Now, obviously not heat stroke, but heat exhaustion, where I've run out in the heat until I was utterly exhausted. You get a headache, you're exhausted, you feel like you're going to explode, you can't think straight. That is what it feels like. It feels like heat exhaustion, but it's just after a workout. You say you're inside, you're in a cool environment, you have plenty of hydration. So the CFE community calls it, chronic fatigue syndrome community calls it post-exertional malaise. And I had been experiencing this for a while. And I was just like, oh, I'm injured now. I overdid it, and in a way that's true, but my nervous system is just like, it's just too much. I'm just pissed at you now, and I was like, okay. And I would just kind of work through it. And I would usually when I got to that point, it would blow the rest of my day. I was not going to feel any different until I went to sleep and woke up. And then depending on whatever factors, I might wake up feeling the same way, but usually didn't last for more than a day. But it was really significant. And so I started, I stopped doing a lot of the things that were pushing the boundaries. And I really tried to stick to doing what I was comfortable with. And I really wouldn't run into it. But if I would change my workout, even if I would do something different, right, and try to work different muscles or whatever, I'd hit the same thing. And so the chronic fatigue syndrome community seems to be a lot more familiar with this and looking at their life and what they do through pacing. And so that means you're what you can do, and you want to keep it up, and you want to push the bounds a little bit. So you do what you can do, you kind of keep track of it, and then you just push the bounds a little bit to where you feel comfortable, and then you stop and you rest, right? You're getting everything you do, you're getting a much better idea of how much and how long you need to rest, rather than how hard and how fast and for how long you can go and exert yourself, right? So it's a completely different lens. And let's take a look. After fasting, before fasting, all kinds of different things would happen at different times. And I would just get exhausted and blown out, and I just sucked. And I would blame it on the weather, and maybe that's true. I would blame it on food, maybe that was true. But I would try to find these external factors to describe why I was getting exhausted. And sometimes it would be mental. I'd be just overstimulated, had too much exposure to loud environments, light, sound, whatever, and that would happen too. But post fast, it became really clear to me, because I had a lot more physical energy, that I had physical energy, but I was overexerting myself. I was overexerting my nervous system, and I was crashing out. And then the crashes became more obvious to me as well, because I would just panic. And I used to panic like that at the beginning of my TMS injury, but I think I got more comfortable with my boundaries, and that stopped happening a lot. Or like my nervous system just started to calm down enough to where it wasn't doing it all the time. So I kind of stopped noticing. But now after the fast, I felt good and I was doing things, and then I was panicking, right? So I was crashing. And then once I panicked, my day's pretty much shot. Like my nervous system just goes cuckoo bananas, and I'm exhausted and I can't think straight and all this stuff. And then I thought that was coming from eating bad food. But my wife pointed out, she's like, I think you're doing too much activity. And I had kind of been suspecting it. She's like, no, I'm serious. Like, I've seen you eat bad food and be fine, or say like sugar or something, or bread, or a piece of pizza, that kind of stuff. I've seen you eat that stuff and be fine. And then other times you're not. Like, I really don't think it's the food. And so I started considering it and doing some experiments, and I found out that she was right. Like, it has more to do with pacing and how much I'm exerting myself rather than the food that I'm eating. Food has a certain manifestation of making me feel bad, right? But it builds up, and I can feel it building up, and my digestion slows down and different things. And then I end up not feeling well. Well, too much activity has like a really quick onset. So I realized that my issue was with pacing. I wasn't thinking about what I'm doing, kind of set a pace and a limit for too much, and then make sure I'm resting for plenty of time afterwards, right? So the community, I think that could really benefit the psychiatric injury community. I think if we looked at things through a pacing lens, it may really enhance our ability to heal and to deal more positively with the constraints that we have, or the symptoms that we're dealing with, that kind of thing. Because I haven't heard much about pacing in the community yet, but I really like the way the CFS community looks at it. Really amazing. The other dimension that brought up for me was that when I was fasting, right, I had lots of healing that was obviously going on in my gut and different things, but I was resting so much when I was fasting. Like, I really, all my whole day was focused on resting and making sure I rested as much as I could. And then as I had energy, just doing a few little things and then coming back to a rest. And now with CFS, like, the whole thing is based on your nervous system is inflamed, and it's being inflamed by your emotional state and your psychological, kind of processes. A lot of negative thinking and stuff perpetuates it. And then, so what if fasting, one of the primary healers in there, was just focusing on resting and giving yourself rest? Because you can't, like, there's a certain point in the fast where you can't not rest anymore. Resting, it just overtakes you. Like, you just don't have that. And you have energy, you feel like you have some, but when you get up to do stuff, like, you just completely cuts off and you slow down, and you get a head rush and all that stuff. You just can't physically go that fast. So it forces you to put yourself into a rest and digest phase, where obviously you're not digesting anything, but you're just resting. So all of your neurological processes are freed up to heal yourself, calm yourself, and get you into a relaxed state, which, if you talk to the psychiatric injury community, or you talk to the CFS community, going to say the linchpin for the causality of all your symptoms is going to be being in an agitated state and being out of a rest state. Agitating your nervous system is always kind of central to how things get worse, or how different symptoms manifest, right? Just existing and having the sun come up and breathing sometimes can agitate your system. But usually there's some other activity that's going on. Your nervous system is under some other kind of stress, whether that's digestion or, movement or thinking, those kinds of things. So it's really interesting to me to think about how much physiological healing is going on during prolonged water fasting, and how much healing is going on just because we're resting our nervous system, and how much benefit could the CFS psychiatric injury community have just from the resting. And then it begs the question, right? Like, if we can find a way to pace well and to rest more, how far along can we get there? And how much can we benefit from that versus fasting? And then can we learn like what the difference is between fasting and, just pacing and resting? I mean, I'm sure there's some degrees of injury that, like, just if you paced yourself and you rested well for a longer period of time, if you took a break from all that crazy stimuli for like 2 months, 3 months, right, and you paced and you rested well for that time, how much healing could you come to? I'm willing to guess that if we got it down and we did it right, there would be a tremendous amount of healing that could happen during that period. And I'm willing to guess that that's a really big part of what we're looking at. I know for CFS, it's a primary thing that they look at. And that, I mean, I haven't seen any of them talk about prolonged water fasting, but so really they heal themselves by committing to pacing and resting themselves emotionally and physically in order to try to get out of this thing, and then change their thinking into a positive mindset, and limbic retraining, and appreciating life in a different way. And that brings me to something that I wanted to talk about. I have 2 more points that I really want to talk about before I close up the cast. But I have friends, this applies to myself, it applies to so many things that I've seen in the community and with people. And one of our biggest obstacles that we have, this is a psychological obstacle primarily, but it has to do with our circumstances and our physical selves as well, I guess. But this is my feeling, right? Everybody's different. Everyone looks at things differently. I'm sure it doesn't go for everything all the time, right? But you have to face what you have to face. You will not escape what you need to change in order to heal and to get better. Some of us have been very busy, and we've been type A and overactive, and we overcommit ourselves, and we expect too much from ourselves. And that's why we end up injured, and it plays a massive part in our injury or our inability to recover. I have multiple friends who, as soon as they feel better, they just start trying to do a bunch of stuff again. They try to go out and get a job and work at something they don't want to do. They start trying to work when they just know they don't want to work, or they shouldn't be working. They need more rest, right? I can't pay my bills, so I have to go do something. I wish that was a valid excuse to heal more or to stop your injury from manifesting. I wish you could say, I have bills, injury, just don't bother me today. I got to work so I can pay the bills, and then you can heal later. I need my injury to stop manifesting or to stop having negative unpleasant symptoms today. I wish that were true, but it's not. It hasn't been for me, and it hasn't been for the people around me. I wish it wasn't true. I hope for some people it's not true. But if there's one thing I want to say to myself and the people I know, like, you have to give yourself the space, and you have to apply yourself to doing what you need to do now, and not to going back to those old habits that sucked you dry in the first place, that made you susceptible to this injury or manifested your injury or just stopped you from recovering from the injury that you did sustain. You have to let go of that. You cannot get away from the things that you need to face. You cannot escape them. They will keep coming around. And the reason I'm saying it like this is because, like, I have friends that are facing extremely hard times, right? And I say that lightly. Like, I'm just afraid they're not going to make it. I'm afraid they're going to die like my other friends have died. And it's because I think in their mind, there's so much pressure from the outside world. There's so much pressure from other people that they're as soon as they're feeling better, they're pushing themselves back, right? And this is not in line with that pacing mentality that I just talked about. It's setting us up for failure and for setbacks. And maybe that can make us stronger. It'll make some of us stronger and help some of us understand. And that's wonderful. Like, I know you know what you're doing. And I want to encourage you to trust yourself and to do what you need to do. But I also want to try to encourage you to take the courage that you need and face the things that you cannot do anymore and you can't go back to. And however things end up, it's okay, in my opinion, right? Can I guarantee that? No, no one can ever guarantee for anybody or anything is ever going to be okay. You know, there's no guarantees in life, and that's the tricky thing with it, right? For me, accepting death and the fact that I'll suffer, I'll be in pain, and I'm going to die, and I can't control how that's going to happen. The only thing I can control is how I live my life. That once I've accepted my own death and suffering, then for me, I can handle going out and doing what I need to do in the way that I think. Because one thing that happened in my life is that I did everything that I thought I was supposed to do, and it was very painful for me to work the job that I was doing at the level that I was doing it, right? But I thought, hey, if I do this, I play by the rules, like it's going to pay off for me. But what happened is it didn't pay off for me, and I paid a horrible, horrible price for it for years on end, right? So when I think about that, I think, what would I have rather done? Like, I would have rather lived the life that I thought that I wanted to live and paid all the consequence for that, including death, pain, and suffering, rather than having played by someone else's rules and having to pay the pain and the suffering and facing down death every single day. I'd rather done it on my terms than on their terms, because the same price came around, right? I had to pay a price that is inconscionable, that is unfathomable in terms of how the amount of suffering that I've been through for the last 5 years, and that was I did it for someone else's dumb rules, playing someone else's dumb game. So if there's one thing that I took away, it was that just play your own game by your own rules. And maybe it will look unpleasant, but it doesn't mean it'll end up bad. In all likelihood, it'll end up really, really well. And you know what? If you die and you suffer as a result, if you're playing your own game and you're doing your own things, you're going to be happy about it. You're going to say, I did things my way to the best of my ability, and I'm happy now that I'm dying or I'm suffering or I'm in pain, right? There's a huge difference. That's the difference that people are missing. That's the thing that we're not understanding. That's what I missed. And that's what I'm still missing a lot of days, right? Just wake up and do things your way. You can trust yourself. You can do that, and it's going to be okay. Whatever consequence comes about because of it is supposed to happen, and you're going to be much more happy about it rather than playing by someone else's rules. I always trick myself into thinking that I'm going to be so unhappy with my own decisions if I do things my way, right? And that's just trying to displace responsibility. Like, I need to be responsible, and I need to trust myself. I need to be responsible for my actions that are my actions, not, the consequence of just trusting someone else to make my own decisions for me. So anyways, I'm not going to ramble about that forever, but a lot of us, myself included, we're still trying to play the game, and we're still trying to get away from the things, escape the things that we have to face. And it may be every day for a long time, but we're going to have to face the fact that some things are not working for us, and we need to stop at all costs. So yeah, I wanted to say that. I wanted people to understand that are on the fence, and they're, starting to feel better, and they think they need to go back to the old habits and the old thinking that they did. Like, you're in remission by as far as I can tell, with all the people I've talked to, which is hundreds and hundreds, including my own experience. Like, you're in remission, like you're in a volatile state. So even if you feel really good, we got to get way further down the road to be able to take some risks and to do some stuff. I mean, that's in terms of doing things we know may be unhealthy, right? You're going to take risks every day with your health that you need to follow your gut and do the right thing to heal yourself. But we got to face, what's in front of us and be realistic. And we need to do what's right for us. That's going to make us feel good and happy every day, and not, what's going to, overcommit ourselves and overwork ourselves and outpace ourselves. I just haven't found a way to get around that one. And I'm saying, after even experiencing profound healing after a prolonged water fast, it did not allow me to just go out and start making the same dumb decisions again and start going back to the old poor thinking habits again. I'm having to master those things. I'm having to get over them and to conquer them and to move forward and to do whatever it takes, right? Like, I'm going to be reclaimed by the same bad state if I just let myself slip into it. In the past, it didn't matter what I did. I was always in that state, no matter how hard I worked. But now I've managed to work myself out to a certain degree, and I'm going to have to keep healing. I'm going to have to keep going. We're not going to escape that fact. So for anyone that's listening, think about that. Obviously, we all come to our own realizations and have our own truth, but that's something I've been dealing with, and I see it in other people's lives, and I've just seen it consistently throughout my relationships. And I want people to hear that, straight up and down, face forward from me. So there's that. And then the other thing I've noticed is, I'm going to shift gears really fast here, but I think I talked about that for long enough, is that with chronic fatigue, an interesting undercurrent I've heard from several of the people that I've talked to, and maybe these are just people who maybe are more outgoing, more honest, and that's how I came to talk to them in more depth or listen to their stories, maybe there's this type A personality thing that comes with this too, but a lot of them did a lot of physical activity. I did a lot of physical activity leading up to my injury. So like running for like anywhere from 2 to 4 hours a day, working out at least twice a day for at least an hour each time, right? Plus doing a bunch of other activity in my day, like a tremendous amount of physical activity, a really big focus on physical fitness. Now, so hearing that, people in same community dealing with the same kind of, problems, I've thought about, like, sometimes I worked out so much, I'm like, I wonder if there's any negative impacts of this somewhere down deep, like obviously my body feels physically stronger, and my mind does for a while. But the thing is that when I felt tired and like I felt mentally exhausted, I would still get up and exercise the same way, because I thought, like, if I stopped exercising or I give myself a break for a day, other than my regular scheduled breaks, that, I'd be going backwards and I'd be losing something. Now, I'm really curious if maybe that was a mistake. I think I look at physical activity in an unbalanced way. Like, I'm afraid to do nothing. Just straight up, I'm afraid to do nothing. If I don't do things, like on my fast, it was very, very difficult for me to sit around and not exercise. I was constantly wanting to exercise because I felt like I was dying if I wasn't doing something, which the opposite turned out to be true on the fast, right? The less I did, the more I healed. I'm sure the better I felt afterwards as a result. But there's a time to rest. And I wonder if some of us are missing the signaling our body's giving us that we're exhausted. Our nervous system is exhausted, and maybe part of that exhaustion is coming from repeated physical exertion on our bodies. Here's another thing that I learned a little while ago that I saw in a study. And, I try to be really, really pragmatic and think really critically about the studies that I read. This one seemed non-agendized, right? No real agenda in it that I saw, but it was a survey of people with, I think it was either MS or Parkinson's or both. I think it was just one or the other. I can't remember exactly. It was a while ago. But what really got me, I'm sure someone can readily find it. I don't remember looking very hard for it. I was looking at, I think, MS for some of the symptoms that I was having at the time. But what it showed is that people who had developed MS or Parkinson's, I can't remember, or maybe Parkinson's-like symptoms, that the group of people that recovered the best from those injuries or lived the longest after having been diagnosed were the ones that worked out moderately. So the group that didn't work out had low life expectancy. The group that worked out a lot had a low life expectancy as well. So I'm wondering what kind of inferences we could make from that, right? Or if it had an impact, because correlation is not causation, right? But given the other evidence I'm seeing with maybe people with CFS and people that have been injured that work out a lot or maybe too much, right? Or have an unhealthy perspective on working out, right? That even right there, you're seeing maybe there's a different causation, right? Maybe people that work out a lot tend to ruminate more and have more negative thoughts and feelings, right? Which could make all kinds of chemical physiological changes to our nervous system that would not be good, right? And maybe people that sit around are depressive and they have negative thoughts, right? And they have a lower life expectancy, for neurological disease. So that could be causation instead of the working out, right? But I'm wondering if based on the pacing, the things that we've seen about physical activity just crashing you out with CFS or psychiatric injury, right? A lot of people I know with psychiatric injury, like when they go to do things, right, they crash. So they end up lying in bed and just not doing anything. Again, just like CFS, right? They just crash out when they try to do stuff. It just doesn't work. They just can't do anything. They end up being bedridden. So what if physical activity and the way we look at it has more to do with healing our nervous system and has a bigger impact on our nervous system rather than our muscular system, right, and our skeletal system than we think? I'm seeing correlations. I'm seeing pieces of the puzzle in different spots being mentioned independently that match the same kind of theme. So I'm just wondering what the role is. I'm wondering with my own history, maybe what the role of that was, because when I got my TMS injury, I was working out a lot. At the time I wasn't at like a peak or anything, but in the years leading up to it, like I was, running again 2 to 4 hours a day. And I had been for years on top of other activity and exercise as well. So, it's really, really, really curious how that might play a role. And I'm certain it has some sort of role. Obviously, we can see by the pacing and the crashing from physical activity, the post-exertional malaise. So it definitely has some sort of role. I'm wondering how much that has to do with thinking, how much it has to do with the physiology, the physiological drain of exercise on our nervous system. I don't think it's studied very well. I haven't seen or known much. It could just be my own ignorance, but people tend to think of exercising as just really positive impact on the nervous system. But really, what are the bounds and constraints for overactivity, and overexertion on the nervous system? Certainly it can't be good, right? Everything in moderation and balance tends to be the theme for stuff. But yeah, so those are my thoughts for today. Wonder if I got anything else that I missed, because I had a few things rolling around. I've been cranking out the podcast a little bit more because I've just been thinking through this stuff as I deal with some ups and downs after the fast, and I really want to understand this well. And I'm learning a lot from others. I'm learning a lot from the CFS community right now, which I'm incredibly thankful for. And I'm learning a lot from some people that are engaging me otherwise. And I guess to close, I'll just want to circle back and talk about tribe. So we're all learning from each other, and the stuff that we're learning from each other, you just don't learn in a doctor's office very well. I'm lucky I had a doctor who saw the relation to CFS, and he saw way more than I did before. I think he saw the pain syndromes, the brain fog, all this other stuff that I was suffering from, besides just the exhaustion. And he saw that I belonged to that CFS community, and there's something more going on. There was an inflammation to my spinal cord and my brain that really wasn't coming up on scans, and that was causing my different symptomology, which it's hard. We don't get a lot of confirmation. Like, diagnostics are not helpful. I was also freaking wirelessly electrocuted, thousands of times, essentially by TMS directly into my brain, right? Like, so that had a severe impact on me. That's what kicked me into this whole thing. Do I think I have CFS, but I was also injured? What's what? There's no way to tell diagnostically as far as I know, right? I tried so hard. So many other people have tried so hard, but it leaves us kind of at a lacking. But my point was, coming back to tribe, like, we are learning from each other far more than we're learning from science. And people are healing, and there's commonalities, and there's things we're sharing that are enabling us to live and to heal and to do what we want to do without the help of the medical institution, right? So the medical institution and doctors can gladly be folded into our tribe and help us in the same way, but they're going to have to let go of the ego and the rigid thinking and the selfishness and the self-righteousness to be in there. Everyone's welcome. Like, I have doctors that I work with that are part of my tribe. Like, I lay down my life for them and show up outside of our formal relationship at any moment. And they would do the same for me, I'm sure. Right. And they've offered as much. Right. But those are individuals, right? They're not, has nothing to do with their profession. Like, they're obviously there to define they're defying their profession, and they have stories for me about how they're ridiculed by friends and family or other doctors because of how they do what they do, and even run into legal trouble, right? And that gets me going. That's awesome. That's amazing. That's incredible. And guess what? That's human, and that's compassionate, and that's doing the right thing, and that's sacrificing for the people around us rather than forcing everybody else to sacrifice their health for crap that doesn't work, so food for thought. But the CFS community, the psychiatric injury community, we have a lot to learn from each other, and I don't think we should segregate each other. I think we should come together and learn and care for each other. And this is like, you look at the potential of that, and then the value of medicine starts to shrink, right? Like, the value of just going and seeing a doctor every time you have a problem starts to shrink. It's like, well, we don't have to do that. Especially with the internet and all the things we have and all the communication we have now, if we communicate well and we're open and honest and caring about each other, the result of that is a million times more powerful than what we're seeing in the medical model right now, because that's based on, self-righteousness, ego, greed, and things like that. That's the model that they're using. That's what they're perpetuating, right? That's the foundation, and they're growing off that foundation, and these are the results, right? If our foundation is, making wise decisions, wise inferences, always being honest and always caring for each other and doing everything we can for each other while maintaining our own health, if that's our foundation and we go forward with that, our results are going to mirror that, right? And it's going to be completely different. It's going to be incredibly powerful. And that's what I'm seeing out there in really limited cases. But what I like is that we see that massively, and that people are learning they can take care of themselves, and they can take responsibility for themselves. And they can be happy with that no matter the outcome. Because I'll tell you what, it's a heck of a lot worse to entrust your health to someone else and be unhappy with that outcome and have to pay for that for the rest of your life. That is something you do not want in any circumstance. And that's, unfortunately, that's what the majority of us are facing. And so, something to think about. But this one's gotten pretty long. If you've managed to get through it, I really appreciate it. I'm gonna try to make some better notes on the videos so that you know what you're getting into when you start listening. So thanks again, and take care. Take care of yourself.